A massive manhunt is underway in the Northeast after at least 18 people were shot and killed in two connected mass shooting events in Lewiston, Maine. The tiny town of just 38,000 people is on lockdown as police search for the person of interest pictured there. Lewiston police said there was an active shooter situation at a bar and grill, a restaurant, and at also a spare time recreation, a bowling alley about 4 miles away. Witnesses report seeing people running away from the bowling alley around 7 p.m. last night.
Now, the person at the center of this manhunt has been identified by police as 40-year-old Robert Card. He's a firearms instructor in the Army Reserve assigned to a training facility in Soave, Maine. Police warned Card is, quote, considered armed and dangerous. Over the summer, Card spent 2 weeks in a mental health facility, according to a document circulated to law enforcement officials and reported by the Associated Press. Card, according to the document, said he was, quote, hearing voices and threats to shoot up the military base he worked at. Survivors reported Card entered the bowling alley and began shooting. Many said they hid behind pins and climbed up into the machinery to remain safe. Police confirmed during a press conference just moments ago that the town's shelter-in-place will remain in effect as the search continues.
Obviously a horrible situation, and we hope the perpetrator is caught swiftly before any more violence takes place. So this person is still obviously just a suspect, but the mental health aspect is interesting. That he spent apparently 2 weeks in a mental health facility, and said he was hearing voices and actually talked about committing a mass shooting and was there for 2 weeks. And that raises questions about when someone enters that state, why is there no, do they have access to firearms? Should they have access to firearms?
Well, that's an interesting question. So in Maine, where this, of course, took place, or is still taking place potentially, there are no red flag laws. Now, if you recall, red flag laws are laws that do exactly that. Flag when someone has had some mental health issue or episode, and put some limitations on their ability to access firearms. They're also known as extreme risk laws. They allow a judge to temporarily remove a person's access to guns. Now, that does not exist in Maine. And in fact, proposals to require background checks, this is some reporting from NBC News, for private gun sales and to create a 72-hour waiting period for gun purchases failed in Maine earlier this year. Proposals that focused on school security and banning bump stocks also failed back in 2019. Residents have also voted down some attempts to tighten gun laws in Maine. A proposal to require background checks for gun sales failed in a 2016 public vote. So it does seem like these issues, potential laws that might have helped to prevent a situation like this, were on the table in Maine over the last few years and were rejected. And it's kind of horrible to consider if there could have been anything that prevented what so far has been already a massive loss of life.
Yeah, I mean, if the voters decide they don't want that kind of restriction in place, then they're not going to have it, and then potentially a situation like this that maybe could have been prevented if you had that law. We say maybe because there's also a lot of, it seems like, slipping through the cracks, even when authorities are supposed to know about a person's should not be someone who has access to firearms. Continuing on, but I don't know.
And Maine apparently also doesn't ban high-capacity magazines. I don't know that we have a lot of details about the nature of the gun that he's been using so far. There have also been some unconfirmed reports about his social media accounts that we'll wait to get more confirmation to get into to see if there were any political incentives or anything that was happening here. But so far, it's a massive loss of life. Hearing people talk about having their 10-year-old's leg grazed by a bullet at the bowling alley on a normal, fall evening. I spoke to some of my friends who are parents this morning, talking about do I want to put my daughter in the car seat while when I'm in the parking lot? Am I going to be able to get her out quickly enough as I'm loading the groceries? Do I want to keep her closer to me as I'm loading the groceries in the back of the car? Because people are fearful. There's a kind of a terrorism that happens when people feel like even in the most mundane aspects of their life, they might be at risk from senseless gun violence. So it's just a really tough situation.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why people feel like that, because it's very broadcast across the news for people to see. I mean, the kid is, though, like, more likely to be hit by a car or have a car accident in the parking lot than they are to be randomly shot. People don't have a good sense of what the relative danger. Not to say there isn't far too much gun violence in the country. There surely is, but it's. I mean, these kinds of actual incidents do not account for the vast majority of gun violence.
Well,
I mean,
nothing to do then.
So people should take. Well, people should, should be aware of the relative dangers of things, and that most, again, the overwhelming majority of gun crime is, well, there's suicides and there's one-off handgun incidents that maybe require some kind of policy solution, but I don't know that people
suicides are highest
should feel
successful suicides. People who end up actually killing themselves are highest in states with the most lax gun laws and with the most guns per capita.
Yeah. No, I think it's inarguable that easy access to firearms does increase incidence of successful suicides. I mean, people have to kind of grapple with that and say, would they be willing to have more restrictions on access to guns if that reduces suicides? I mean, it's a policy question, I guess.
I do hope there's more reporting on what the dynamics of the fight over certain gun reforms in Maine are. Are there political figures who are going to take heat now for advocating against some of these red flag policies and bans on bump stocks and other kinds of weaponry that are typically used in mass shootings? Is there going to be any political accountability at any point? How much of this, the outcome of not having any red flag laws, was kind of the democratic will of the people of Maine, and how much was it a consequence of lobbying efforts? We've seen so often, and we've talked so frequently on this show about the lack of relationship on a federal level between what the populace wants and what Congress is willing to pursue legislatively. And I'd be curious to hear more reporting about how Maine ended up in this situation and whether or not the political winds might change after a grievous, horrible event like the ones they've been experiencing over the last 24 hours.
Sure, although, I don't know, from looking at polling on gun issues, it doesn't seem to me that there's a lot. I mean, rural, even Democrats who live in rural areas are hunters and want access to firearms. I mean, I'm sure there's some support for certain restrictions, but a broad kind of contempt for guns is not, I don't think, part of like a
Is it a
populist
broad contempt for guns to say that someone who was just hospitalized in a mental institution for saying they wanted to shoot up a military base should maybe not have access to a gun?
I would be fine with a policy that restricts the person in that case.
Yeah, so I'm curious.
Yeah.
Maine doesn't have that policy, and I'm curious whether an event like this will change people's opinion to the extent that they didn't already support that kind of a policy. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. More Rising right after this.